Hello, this is Grace chatting, and welcome to Relationship Academy, where we teach lessons that they didn't teach at school. And I'm really pleased to be with you on this third webinar on relationship mastery. And today we're looking at really important conversations that you need to have before you say I do, and really things that you need to think about that often couples don't consider. But before we get into it, let's mute your mobile, switch off Facebook and any other apps that you've got going at the moment. Grab a notebook and a pen because you will need to take notes here, and take note of the stop button. You'll see on some slides that in the bottom right hand corner there is a stop sign, and that means you'll need to stop the video and make some notes on the content of that slide. And I really do encourage you to do that if you want to get the best results from the webinars. So the story so far in webinar 1, we looked at, are you ready for love? And we looked at the fact that many people might want a relationship, but they're not necessarily ready for one. And that's because they may be on the rebound from a previous relationship, or they've got a pattern of failed relationships, or they've never really got to know themselves, or they're not clear about what it is that they want. So webinar 1 covered all of that, and about the importance of having a good relationship with yourself first and being happy with you before, without thinking, having a relationship with somebody else is what will make you happy. And webinar 2, we looked at that journey from single to couple, and how the different stages of that need to happen, and how important it is to go through those stages without skipping any. And we also looked at how to get to know somebody and not just be going on the chemistry between the two of you, but that it's important to get to know somebody, and that getting to know somebody is a skill in itself, and to learn if you can trust them, if you can rely on them. Are they somebody that you can commit to before you get heavily involved in a sexual relationship with them? Because once you get involved in a sexual relationship, you begin to form an attachment before you actually know if the person is trustworthy or indeed is right for you. So that's what we've covered so far. And now we're going to move on to assuming that you are in a relationship and it's getting serious, and you are considering making a serious commitment, or indeed getting married. So before you do that, here are some things to consider. First of all, you need to consider the fact that there is such a thing as a transitional relationship, and it's beyond the scope of this webinar to go into it here, but a transitional relationship is one where uh, individuals have come out of a relationship, maybe a marriage or a long-term relationship that broke down, and then they meet somebody and they form an attachment. And that relationship is usually a very healing one. It's good for both parties at the time, and both parties learn from it. But in fact, it is a relationship that takes them from where they were to where they are headed and meant to be. But it's not really a long-term lifetime relationship. And sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that if they're in a relationship with somebody for a few years, they try to make it into a lifetime relationship. So I'm just flagging up that although it might be a good relationship, it may not be meant to be for a lifetime. So just give that some thought. So another really important matter that many, if not most couples don't consider is the idea of boundaries. So look at this diagram here, and you'll see here's John and here's Jane, and this is the overlap between them here. So it's a bit of a thin overlap, but look at the overlap with her family and friends, with both of them as a couple. Huge overlap. John's family and friends, there's a bit more of an overlap with him in his life and only a little bit with Jane. but this is a matter of concern. So before you say I do, for sure, you need to be looking at how much involvement are your families having in your relationship, and does it get in the way of your relationship? I'm thinking of a couple I saw for coaching once, and they had been together for 10 years and the relationship was in danger of breaking up because things like her mother had always had everybody to her for Christmas and had always booked pantomime tickets for the pantomime on Boxing Day. And here they were 10 years into their relationship and her mother was still doing that. And he didn't actually want to spend his every Christmas and Boxing Day doing that. But somehow she wasn't able to tell her mother they didn't want to do that anymore. And they had got locked into her mother being over involved in their lives, really. So looking at a more healthy boundaries, it would be here's Jane and here's John, and you can see they've got a bit more involvement with each other. The we between them is quite a solid we, but there's enough of Jane outside of John, and there's enough of John outside of Jane to be healthy. That's a healthy interdependent relationship. You know, they've got a life outside each other. And his family are, yes, a little bit more involved with him than Jane, and her family a little bit more involved with her, but still a bit involved with him here. And this is all a lot more healthy. So do stop and take stock of how much involvement your families are and friends are having with each of you and in your relationship. And it is something to talk about, how you expect to spend Christmases and holidays and what kind of involvement you expect to have with your friends and family in the future. Because you may just make assumptions that these things will change once you're married and together, but not necessarily. I know a man who had lunch with his mother every Sunday, and his fiance assumed that would change once they got married. But once they had children, and he was still having lunch with his mother every Sunday. So don't make assumptions that things will be different. Talk about it. So moving on now to quite a serious issue, which is beyond the scope of this webinar. In fact, on one of my courses, there is a whole webinar given over to the Cartman triangle. I'm saying here, stop the blame game. Many couples, when they get into a disagreement or difference of opinion, now some couples can just have a difference of opinion and just accept the difference. But others one will get into being a victim, which means the other party is to blame, and they almost compete with each other for whose fault is it, who's to blame, who's the victim, who's the villain, and who's going to be the person that they go to rescue them. So I've put my email address there of my blog. If you go to or email me, and I will send you an article on the Cartman triangle, because this, if you learn nothing else, this is the most important thing to learn, how the Cartman triangle operates, so that you don't get into blaming each other, but rather you look to understand how did that happen. So moving on from that and kind of aligned with that is to draw your attention to the fact that intimacy and closeness, there is an ebb and flow to intimacy, and it helps if you understand. You'll see the ups and the downs here, and the fact that this line represents the upper limit of how close you can get. Every couple's kind of got their own, it's like a central heating system with a thermostat. When it reaches a certain temperature, the thermostat kicks in. And likewise, when people reach a certain level of closeness, a kind of emotional thermostat kicks in to reduce the temperature. Now, sometimes, mostly when couples are on holiday or have had a nice weekend away, they feel really close, and then they come home And sometimes, often actually, couples will have a row with each other or a disagreement, and they kind of become not quite so close to each other, and that kind of dips down. But then they gradually get their closeness back again. But then they reach the limit again and it goes back down again. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my thing here. So you'll notice, but sometimes if they have a big row, they go down into a Cartman triangle and, they have a big disagreement and feel really cross and angry with each other and maybe get into whose fault is it, who's to blame. And it takes a bit longer to get back up again. So that's what happens. So if you've been away on holiday and you've had a lovely week, it's always a good idea to part company. Go do your own thing for a day or so and leave each other alone, so you don't have to have a big row to have a bit of emotional space. The main thing to consider here is that eventually what you want to do is to break that pattern and to, allow your intimacy to, go up onto another level and to reach new levels. And that means beginning to understand what is it that you both do when you reach this point. You need to do something different if, like here, you're going to go past it. So that's another whole webinar on its own, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it. So now, looking at what are the deal breakers. Now, these are absolutely crucial conversations that you need to have with each other. The children, money, and sex. So you need to know if you are considering, going into a lifetime relationship with somebody, that these are things that you absolutely need to have talked about. And indeed, you need to have talked about it long before you got really attached to each other. And that is, do you want to have children? Do you want to have a family? Have that conversation. And if you're with somebody who thinks they don't want to have children and is fairly sure they don't want to have children, don't assume that they're going to change their mind later on. You really need to get clear on this before. And if that's somebody, if you want to have children and somebody you're with doesn't, then you need to work on the basis that they probably won't change their mind, or if they do, they'll come to resent the situation. So the other thing is money. Once again, don't assume that you know what your partner or potential life partner's financial setup is. I've seen a lot of couples get together and say, well, I didn't know that he had over £20,000 worth of debt when we first got together. You need to be talking about finances and what your financial situation is and how you want it to be and how you anticipate managing your finances together. Don't make assumptions about this. And the third thing is sex. Most couples when they first get together are kind of like rabbits. They're at it all the time and it's all wonderful. But as time moves on, for some, one or other of the parties goes off sex, and it can transpire that they each have different libidos. One person is very happy to make love once a week. Another one wants to make love 3 or 4 times a week. Somebody else might think, oh well, once every few weeks is enough. You need to have a conversation about this and get clear, just how strongly do you feel about it and how important is it to you. You'll remember in webinar 1 or 2, I can't remember now, we looked at values. Whereabouts do each of these, family, money, sex, where are they on the value spectrum for you? So Another thing that you need to be looking at before you really get committed is developing assertiveness skills and being emotionally honest with each other. Often couples or people won't be honest with each other because they don't want to offend somebody or they don't want to upset them. And really, that's kind of taking responsibility for somebody else's feelings. You really need to talk about things, and it's if you're going to spend your life with somebody, yes, you take a risk that they might be upset or offended, but that's up to them. They don't have to be upset or offended. So you really need to talk to each other about um, being honest, that you agree with each other, that your expectation is to be honest and not to take offense when you're being honest with each other. Assertiveness skills. This is a nice little formula for assertive communication, which is describe the situation, express how you feel, specify what you want, and what are the consequences if that doesn't change. So stop the video and make a note of this. That say, you know. Um, Perhaps your partner has been working late most nights of the week and you're hardly ever seeing them. You might say something like, John, you for the last 2 weeks you've worked late every night. I'm beginning to feel lonely and I miss you. So specify what you want. I want you to spend more time with me. Consequences are, if we carry on as we are, our relationship's going to suffer. So there, that's being honest and concise. It's saying what the situation is, how you feel about it, what you want, and what the consequences are. And it took about half a minute to say. It's good for both of you to make note of this and develop this skill of being assertive and honest. And that is a great little formula for developing that skill. And I would encourage you to do that. So moving on now, not time to go into it large, but on the course there are webinars on each of these topics on looking at and being aware of your connection and what you can do to keep that connection going. And I'm talking about at a heart to heart level where you actually carry each other in your heart throughout the day. Your communication, how much you talk to each other, not just about logistics, what time will you be home, or what time's dinner, or what are we having for dinner, but actually communicating and having generative conversations with each other. A lot of people do a lot of talking when they first get together, and then they are getting a home together, getting married, and so they talk about where they're going to live, and they talk about the wedding and all of that. And then when they've been together for a year or two, they've got nothing left to say to each other because it was all things they were talking about. They weren't really communicating and they weren't having a conversation, they were having discussions. So it's really useful for you to look into what's the difference between all of these things. And another C that I didn't put on there was conflict resolution. Learn how to resolve conflict as well. So all of these things are covered on the relationship mastery courses. So I'm suggesting that you give your relationship the best chance of success by learning more about these important relating skills. So why not sign up for one of our courses now? There's a relationship mastery for singles and relationship mastery for couples. There is also coming up relationship mastery for couples whose relationships have run into trouble, and relationship mastery for the recently divorced or separated. So go and visit www.relationshipacademy.co.uk, and I hope you find this useful. Bye now.